Hello, pals! I am Jodan54, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. So, now that I have officially graduated, I'm going to be looking back at my college career, and I'm going to be ranking every single class that I took. Now, a little bit about me. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science, dualing in Computer and Systems Engineering and Electrical Engineering from RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. That dual major involved taking quite a few courses, in fact so many that I actually did not have any space to apply credits from free electives, so I was effectively overloading a little bit on every single semester, taking tons of different classes, some of which were great, some of which weren't. We're going to have the full spectrum on this list, and in fact, I think we ought to take a look at the list and the way that it's structured. So let's transition over. And here it is. Now, a lot of people will use stuff like TierMaker to make lists like this, to make tier lists like this. And I would do that, but there's two main reasons that I'm not using TierMaker. One is there isn't a template made for TierMaker for this kind of stuff. It's a little too oddly specific, and you'd have a bit of a difficult time when it comes to actually getting the classes to appear in the thumbnails that you'd be able to drag onto the different tiers. And the other reason is the TierMaker UI sucks ass. It's terrible. It's fucking garbage, and I will take any excuse to avoid using it. I have a screenshot from TierMaker in Photoshop, and we're going to use that instead. Oh, and by the way, obviously this list is subjective. It's biased from my biases and my opinions. This is in no way meant to be objective, and not only that, but everybody's experiences in these classes vary. You could take a class one semester and it could be S tier. You could take a class the next semester with a different professor and it would be E tier. A lot of this is luck of the draw, so keep that in mind as I rank this stuff. So, I suppose we shouldn't waste any more time. Let's begin. Starting in fall 2018, you can see the first column here is the 5 classes that I took in fall 2018. Starting with Gen Psych. Now, back when I took Gen Psych, it was a meme. It was the humanities class that people would take to pass and apply an elective for. And it certainly did not give me the best impression of what college was like. It was the kind of class where the professor would just kind of intimidate you because the vast majority of the people in the class were freshmen. It was a massive class, so you couldn't really connect with the professor. It was material that I wasn't interested in. It was just a very not fun experience altogether. Especially for someone who was actually trying to get an A in the class, and sort of succeeded if you count A minuses. So yeah, not a great experience. It's going in E tier. Up next, Calc 2. I came in with AP credit for Calc 1, so I started in Calc 2. Things sort of picked up where Calc 1 left off. The structure of the class was very well made, and it was just overall very well-run course with material that felt very understandable. It was explained very well by the professor, who I would later have for my other math courses, and he's fantastic. So yeah, this was a great experience. This was my favorite class of fall 2018. And it's going to go in A tier. Moving on from that, we have Computer Science 1. This is an interesting case for me because I came into this college with 0 programming experience, which was not the case for the vast majority of my friends who were computer science majors. And a lot of them came in with credit for this course from AP Computer Science. I did not, and so I had to take a computer science course to learn computer science and programming in the first place. So the question is, how well did this course do at teaching me coding from 0 experience to being able to program things on my own? The answer? Pretty good, actually. The course was in Python. It started from the very basics. By the end, we were making classes, custom data types, and actually working with that kind of stuff. It was a very naturally feeling progression. It was difficult and daunting because I didn't really have any experience like this before, but all things considered, class did a pretty good job at that. So it's going to go in B tier. Physics 1. So this class was probably the scariest, at least initially, going in for me because of how bad AP Physics went for me in high school. I thought that I was completely hopeless when it came to physics. I thought I was completely incapable of understanding it, and that physics was just an impossible concept for my brain. Turns out, I was wrong. my high school AP Physics teacher was just hot garbage, and physics can actually be taught to me pretty well. And by pretty well, I'm referring to this class in particular, because the lecturer I had was phenomenal, and the experience was surprisingly smooth. Now, I would put this higher on the list, but we had to use this online system called Mastering, and that sucked a lot of the fun out of it for me. But regardless, this was still a breath of fresh air when it came to physics. It restored my personal faith in doing this kind of problem solving, and for that, it's also going to go in B tier. The final class I took in my first semester was a class called Intro to Engineering Analysis. This is sort of the general introductory engineering course. For my majors, I actually didn't have to take this, but I was placed in it initially because I came in as undeclared. So yeah, I ended up taking it, and to be honest, I'm glad that I did because it helped give me the foundational knowledge I needed for other courses like Physics and Calc 2, because these courses have a lot of crossover material, especially when it comes to vectors, and having just a bunch of redundant foundational knowledge actually helped quite a bit. The class was structured very well, but we again had to use Mastering, and this time it was worse than ever. I don't know if I've mentioned this before in any of my videos, but my god, it was a horrific experience to try and draw vectors with a mouse on a three-dimensional free body diagram on a computer screen and getting points off because you were a pixel incorrect. It was terrible, and this class would be higher, but that existed. Also, you got points off for putting too many significant figures on exams, which is just dumb. So yeah, this class is gonna go in C tier. Alright, so moving on, we have spring 2019. Going into this semester, this was actually the first semester where I was actually choosing my courses. They were sort of chosen for me at orientation before freshman year. This time around, I was picking, and I decided data structures is scary. So I'm only going to take 4 courses this semester, and one of them is going to be a single credit hour. That should help lighten the load. And looking back on it, it did help lighten the load, but I think I went a little overkill. I probably could have afforded to take a little more. Regardless, let's talk about the classes that I did end up taking. Starting with Intro to Differential Equations. This was taught by the same guy that I had for Calc 2, and he did just as good of a job explaining the concepts of differential equations, if not even better, actually. There was so much detail that he went into for every single concept. And especially for the classes that I would end up taking, having this depth of knowledge when it came to differential equations, especially for things like Laplace transforms, the Dirac delta function, Fourier series, things like that, it was vital. And he didn't have to do this. This was a math course. Like, you didn't have to do this. This was not necessarily supposed to be tailor-made to engineers, but he made sure that it kind of was. And for that, I respect the hell out of him for it. And it is going to join Calc 2 in A tier. Intro to ECSE. ECSE standing for Electrical, Computer, and Systems Engineering. At this point, I was firmly in Computer and Systems Engineering. I had not declared my dual in electrical yet, but Intro to ECSE sort of gave the circuit foundational knowledge, wiring, Ohm's Law, basic circuit stuff, breadboarding, this funny little analog discovery thing that we had that was out of stock at the beginning of the semester. And so, yeah, it was a fun time. It was extremely lab-oriented, and it was also a flipped course, which I was not the hugest fan of. It basically meant there were no lectures and you just kind of had to watch videos on your own, which was foreshadowing for what the majority of my college experience would end up being against my will and against the will of a lot of professors. But even at this point, I was still not a big fan of it. The labs themselves were pretty fun. It would have been nice if the lab report templates were not written as if they were put through Google Translate 10 times. That combined with some confusing grading on the lab reports sort of dampened the experience a bit. It would be higher, but those flaws definitely drag it down quite a bit. And it is going to go in C tier. Alright, so now we have the big one. I have mentioned this class many times in my videos, my vlogs, etc. This course needs very little introduction. It is the weed out course for any major that has to take it. I had watched my friends suffer through the nightmare of this course the semester prior, so I was not looking forward to it. And, well, it certainly lived up to its name. It was a semester-long panic attack. In reality, it was insanely difficult. There was really no break at any point. Towards the beginning, it was a little more forgiving. The first 3 homeworks or so were pretty manageable. Then there was a massive difficulty spike on the 4th homework. And from that point onward, it was just pain. And it really just didn't seem like anybody running the class cared. And that certainly didn't help. It just was the kind... Not only was it a class that made you suffer, it was a class that seemed intentionally designed to make you suffer. The exams would open up asking you arbitrary questions about your lab mentors that didn't relate to class material at all. And because the mentors had Stockholm Syndrome up the ass, they would actually defend this choice to put these on exams for actual points on the exams. It's ridiculous. It was a situation that certainly repelled me away from potentially dueling in computer science, which I'm glad that I did not do. Now, all that said, the class was actually organized fairly well, and I did come out of it knowing quite a bit more about programming. So, while this class was a never-ending nightmare and is one of only 2 classes I've ever had real nightmares about after the fact, it is actually going to still end up in C tier. Also, looking back on it, I have a soft spot for this course because I met a lot of my closest friends in it. And as far as data structures goes, if you told me that after taking data structures, I was going to take 7 courses that were harder than it, I would have dropped out on the spot. Finally, we have engineering communications. This is the super easy 1-credit course that I was taking this semester. I had the choice between taking either this course or a class called Engineering Graphics and CAD, which is known for being one of the hardest 1-credit courses in the entire school. It was a choice for my major specifically to take either that or communications. Other engineering majors often did not have this choice and would have to take CAD. The CAD program that we use is called Siemens NX, and it is an absolute bitch on our hardware. In engineering communications, we only have to use it for 1/3 of the course, which gives this class the nickname of Bitch CAD. It's fairly accurate, but at the same time, it left this class very uninteresting. After the 1/3 that we spent in CAD, it was basically just, here's how to format a Word document and do calculations in Excel, and here's this bastardized graphical programming thing called LabVIEW. It was more than manageable. It was incredibly easy, but it was an absolute snooze fest and a half. And because of that, it is going to go in the D tier. Alright, fall 2019. This was actually probably my favorite semester of college. I enjoyed a fair amount of the courses that I was taking, and it just felt like I was exerting myself to a crazy degree every single day, and that probably had some drawbacks to it. I probably was kind of destroying my body this semester because I was going hard in a lot of extracurriculars while also taking a lot of hard courses. Let's talk about the courses I did take this semester. Starting with Foundations of Computer Science. Oh boy. So I was doing this semester the thing that a lot of people do, where they're riding off the high of surviving data structures, and this is the part where I flex about the fact that I got an A in data structures. They feel invincible, so they overload on the next semester. And the sequel to Data Structures is a course called Foundations of Computer Science. This course does not have any programming in it. It is entirely discrete math and fundamentals of proofs, and a little bit of theory of computing, Turing machines, that kind of stuff in it, squeezed in towards the end. It is some of the most boring material I have ever had to put myself through. Every single homework in this class was pain, and it was only made worse by the fact that each homework was only worth 1% of your grade. The final exam was worth 35% of your grade. A single midterm exam was worth another 25%, and then there were 3 quizzes, each worth 10. Basically what that amounts to is an open response question on the final exam could be worth multiple homeworks. So spending a lot of hours on the homeworks felt a little demotivating. But you had to do it because that was the only way to practice. So it was an awful time, honestly. However, the fundamentals that it taught me when it came to things like logic and applying certain algebraic operations to math equations was actually surprisingly really valuable. And that, combined with the fact that I had the greatest lecturer of all time. If you know, you know.
So, there's no forgiveness for that.
Actually saves it from being bottom of the barrel, and it's going to end up towards the top of D tier. Oh boy, we get to talk about embedded control. I'm not even going to beat around the bush here. This is going towards SS tier immediately. Alright, embedded control, also known as LITEC. This course is absolutely stellar. So, this course teaches the fundamentals of embedded software. You're coding in C, you're using a microcontroller, you're programming algorithms with a circuit that then programs this car to move around, you program games with LEDs, you actually interface with embedded systems, and it's great. It's so much fun. I was also lucky enough to be on a really good team for this. The structuring was great. The only thing that could have made this better was if they nerfed the exams by 10%, 25%, no, 100 fucking percent they need to nerf those exams, Jesus Christ. Thank God there's no final in this course. Also, that accelerometer lab sucked ass, but that's okay. This class was just fun from start to finish. I loved every bit of it. It was my first experience in embedded software, and it led to the full-time job that I have now, so I have that to thank for it. Without a doubt, my favorite class that I took at this school. So shout out to Embedded Control. Moving on, we have the sister class to Embedded Control. You sort of take these two classes together. This one's called Computer Components and Operations, often abbreviated to COCO. This course actually taught some of the most interesting and cool material I have ever learned in any class. Finite state machines, digital logic, and the kind of circuit wiring that we were doing was all super fun and cool. So all that said, why is this class going in C tier? Well, the simple answer is the structuring could use some work, and the lectures could use some serious work. Oh man, the lectures felt like they had no direction to them, and you just felt like you learned nothing from them. You felt like you learned very little from the homeworks as well. It was just the kind of class where you just kind of needed to look up back tests from past semesters in order to really learn anything. But if you did that, it was a good time. I would learn this after the first exam, but that's okay. Also, that final exam was a nightmare. Holy shit. This class would be higher, but there were a lot of things dragging it down. If I took this class in a different semester, it could have been S tier. But as it stands, it's C. Multivariable calculus and matrix algebra. One of the coolest and nerdiest sounding classes I've ever taken. It's another math course, and it combines two things that you wouldn't think would go together. And if you took this with any professor other than the one that I had, you probably would have walked out of the class wondering why the hell these two concepts were smacked into the same course. My professor graciously answered that question at the end of the class by combining the two materials with this specific sort of like linear transformation change of variable that combined matrix multiplication with a double integral. It was super cool. We literally gave him like a standing ovation at the end of that lecture. That's how good it was. And that sort of gave you the idea of just how much fun this course was from start to finish. And to make an engineer like me enjoy linear algebra, that's an impressive feat. Well worthy of putting this class in S tier. Engineering processes. This class exists, apparently. I took this class for fun. This was before I declared my dual in electrical engineering, so this was back when free electives might have actually meant something for me. And so I decided to take this one credit course because it was pass-fail, and it seemed fairly simple until I decided basically you had two options for a thing that you'd build for the semester. There was the thing that the TAs knew how to help you with, and the thing the TAs didn't know how to help you with. I went into that class knowing one was hard and one wasn't. I didn't know the reasons. The TA thing was the reason, and I chose the harder one because I just wanted to make it. It seemed cooler. And, let's just say that was kind of a bit of a mistake, at least in terms of the experience of the class. I was proud of finishing it at the end of the semester, but man, was it not fun going through that, especially because I did not have the greatest lab partner for this course. And so just the whole experience of it and just feeling like I was very alone and not getting the help that everybody else was getting just because I chose the other of the two options that were presented to me. Yeah, this class is going in D tier. Alright, now we go into spring 2020. Now, let's count the classes together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh god. Now, this actually sums up to 18 credit hours, because 2 of these were 1 credit hour courses, and they were both pretty easy, but the other 4 made for quite the difficult semester, especially considering this was the semester that went online midway through. Yeah, this was definitely a semester where not all of the courses were a winner. Namely, the first one we'll talk about, Intro to Algorithms, my first F tier. Let's talk about why. So this is the sequel to Foundations of Computer Science, which after coming out of the course you might be like, oh boy, please tell me we're actually going to take a class with coding in it. And then the monkey's paw curls a finger. So this course teaches you about different specific algorithms, but a lot of it is stuff that you would have already learned, like depth first and breadth first search, and graph theory and that kind of stuff that you would have already learned in some of these other courses. And then you finally get into other stuff like divide and conquer and greedy algorithms and dynamic programming, which are all important algorithm concepts. But to say they were not taught well this semester would be the understatement of the semester. The lectures did not understand the concept of having direction at all. And for a concept as abstract as this, especially for my engineering brain, this was an absolute nightmare, and the textbooks certainly didn't help. It just seemed like the kind of class where you just kind of had to look up every answer. It didn't seem like there was any learning process. I felt like I came out of this class knowing less about algorithms than I did when I walked into it. It was taught so poorly, and it certainly didn't get any better online. Up next, we have Computer Architecture, Networks, and Operating Systems, often abbreviated to KANOS. This is the direct sequel to Coco, and it picks up right where it left off, which is always something I love about courses like this, and it builds on those concepts by delving into processor data paths, and assembly, and memory hierarchies, and the way it was explained was really thorough, which was characteristic of this professor, and he just did a fantastic job of making sure everybody understood the concepts and properly tested everything on every exam. It's one of those courses and one of these professors where you really don't have to worry about studying the wrong thing on an exam because everything's going to be on there. The final exams really felt like final exams, and they didn't feel unfair either. They were solid. Everything about this class was solid. So it's going in S for solid. Electric circuits. This was a fun class. Oh boy. And I don't say that sarcastically. This was actually a really fun course. Also an insanely difficult one, but one that I enjoyed the whole way through. It taught these really great mathematical circuit concepts, applying all this different knowledge, and explaining circuits way better than Physics 2 did, which I took in the same semester. You'd expect Physics 2 to go deeper into the math side of things than an engineering course did. You would be wrong. And Circuits did a fantastic job at being extremely thorough when it came to the concepts. And I learned a lot from this course. And the hands-on approach that it took to the circuit labs and everything was fantastic. The open-ended Omega labs were super cool. And it was also taught by the best professor I've ever had. So all of that combined means that it's going to join my tech in SS tier. Fantastic course. Physics 2. This class is notorious for being the class that people specifically avoid and take at some other college over like the summer or something because of how bad the reputation of this course is. It is known for being pure pain, not being enjoyable at all, and you don't learn anything, and it was all these things that I was being told, and I knew it wasn't going to be a fun experience because every single section I could have possibly registered for this course in this semester was an 8 a.m. Not particularly fun for a college student. So I did not exactly go into this course with the highest of expectations. And to be completely honest, I wasn't exactly blown away. But at the same time, I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. Physics 2, welcome to the D tier. Not a great course, but I think the hatred for it is a little overblown. I think the structuring of it has the same solid structuring as Physics 1. The lectures are pretty solid, they're good reference material. It's just that there's some explanations that are not the best, and the labs were absolutely fucking insufferable. If Intro to ECSE labs were put through Google Translate 10 times, Physics 2 labs were put through Google Translate 100 times, and then were put through DALL-E 2. I have no idea how you were supposed to get through these labs without the help of a translator, aka a lab facilitator. And it certainly didn't get any easier when things went online. That said, the hatred for the course, like I said, is a little bit overblown, but it certainly didn't help that once again we had to use mastering for this course. Thankfully, I was able to close the book on that service once this class was over. Up next, ECSE Enrichment Seminar. This is the easiest course that I have ever taken, and I was a little worried on the first day of this course because the scariest thing that you can ever hear a professor say at the beginning of a semester is, "Oh, this semester, we're gonna be teaching it a little differently." That is the scariest sentence you can ever hear a professor say on the first lecture. And that's exactly how Enrichment Seminar started up. So I had a feeling it was going to be a nightmare. And it was a little scary because I lost track of who was in my presentation group, but by the time that we actually had to work on the presentation, we had found everybody together. I told this story in one of the catching up episodes. It was a story of pure chance and a little bit of an epic adventure, but it ended up turning out great, and this was actually the only class that I ever, in terms of everything that was graded, got a perfect score in, which, to be honest, is in no way a testament to my achievement, and is more of just a testament to the fact that this class is very easy and very innocuous, and all of that taken into account, it is going to go in C tier. It's not bad, it's just nothing special. And that's kind of how I feel about Professional Development 1 as well. Now, my major has to take a course called Intro to Engineering Design, which sort of includes Professional Development 1 in it. But I came in with high school credit for Intro to Engineering Design, so I just had to take PD1 on its own and didn't have to deal with Intro to Engineering Design. PD1 on its own was weird because everybody else was coming from a community college, and then there was just me. Which was kind of funny. This class definitely got a lot easier when things went online. It just kind of felt like a lot of the assignments just kind of disappeared and were never assigned once things went online. Part of that being due to just the class being a kind of class that's near on impossible to teach online, which was kind of rough, but it was another just very inoffensive class. I don't really have any strong feelings about it, and as a result, it is going to go in the C tier. So that's the first half of courses down. Now we go into the second half, and we get to talk about Summer Arch. Oh no. Why did I take 6 courses totaling 20 credit hours over Arch? What the fuck was wrong with me? And not only that, but it was online Arch. I definitely should have dropped a course. That said, let's talk about the courses themselves. We just talked about PD1, let's talk about PD2. This class was completely different from PD1. PD1 was talking about personality, dynamics, and all this stuff. PD2 was, let's talk about a bunch of engineering disasters and a bunch of people who are bad at their jobs. Like, comically bad at their jobs. And let's have some fun with it. It was a pretty fun course. It only lasted half the semester for me, and it was 8 a.m., and it was attendance required for that 8 a.m. And even taking those things into account, it was still enjoyable enough to go in A tier. It was actually a lot of fun, and the presentation that we did was great. Signals and Systems. This is quite possibly the hardest course I have ever taken. It is extremely math heavy. It deals with the intricacies of signal processing and convolution. It goes very deep. It kind of felt like the final bastion of calculus concepts that I would learn. Everything was just incredibly in-depth and thorough, and the grading was absolutely fucking ruthless in this course. Like, there would be no sympathy for slight errors in math problems. And the only thing that helped was that this was the kind of grading system that was applied equally to everyone. So everyone got shat on in this course. That said, the structuring of it, the material that we learned, the professor we had, It was all actually really, really good. It was just nightmarishly difficult. Literally. Remember how I said data structures was one of 2 courses I have had literal nightmares about after the fact? Signals and Systems is the other course. That said, I still love the material enough to put it in A tier. It was a good time. Analog role-playing games. It took until the 5th semester for me to have a wake-up call and say, oh shit, that's right, I need to take some humanities courses. And that's when I would find out that you could take some game design courses to satisfy those requirements. I was originally going to take a different course called Films Every Game Designer Should See this semester. It was probably going to be quite an easier course, and it was going to actually not have a scheduling conflict with one of my other courses, and it was going to be a lot nicer to take, probably, all things considered. Then when things online, the class got canceled, and the professor who was going to teach it got laid off. So I had to find a plan B. That plan B was analog role-playing games. The class was exactly what it sounded like. You learn about analog tabletop RPGs. You play them. You play a lot of them. And if you have 0 experience in playing them going into the course, like I did, you learn a lot about them. You get very familiar with rolling very large dice virtually over a Discord server because this semester was online. And this class also involved a lot of writing, to the point where, at least for this course, I felt like it got a little bit excessive. That said, it was still really fun to reflect on every single class that we had, and it was still overall pretty fun experience. I just felt like there was a little too much fluff involved in it. Still a good time. It's going to go in high B tier. If there was a B+ tier, analog RPGs would go in there. Intro to Complex Variables. I ended up taking this course because I felt like having a more enriched knowledge and foundation in complex analysis and using complex numbers, I felt like that would be useful for my major. And I was right. This course, actually, there would be some concepts that would come up in later courses that were taught in this one. So it certainly wasn't a waste on that regard. And on top of that, it satisfied one of my elective requirements, so it was just a win-win, especially considering a lot of my friends were in this course this semester. Compared to the other pure math courses that I had taken, the material in this course was very advanced. Lots of proofs, lots of advanced concepts, lots of integrals, and of course lots of complex numbers. The class was, very complex. It kind of made you feel cool when you were solving a lot of these problems, especially in the second half of the semester, where it was being taught by the same guy who taught the other math courses. And he was so good at explaining things that you would do these crazy problems that he taught you how to solve, and you'd feel like a badass. At the same time, though, the first half of the semester certainly wasn't as good. The other professor would give extra credit to people who typed their homeworks out using this thing called LaTeX, which, for those of you who don't know, LaTeX is sort of, it's this typesetting language that pretty much translates to, I'm a turbo virgin. For legal reasons, that's a joke. But, as an engineer, I have to shit on LaTeX. LaTeX sucks. Just have good handwriting. But yeah, there were some things in the first half of the course that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But at the end of the day, things ended up still balancing out to a good time, and this course is going to go in B tier. It's also worth noting that because I had to shuffle my schedule around last second, analog role-playing games and Intro to Complex Variables were at the exact same time slot, but Intro to Complex Variables had pre-recorded lectures, so I was still able to take both. This degree of class overloading was probably something I should have avoided looking back, but, this was the way the cookie crumbled. Intro to Electronics. This class is the direct sequel to Electric Circuits. It picks up right where it left off. While Electric Circuits taught a bunch of stuff about linear circuits and linear components, like resistors, capacitors, inductors. Intro to Electronics was about the non-linear components, stuff like non-ideal amplifiers, diodes, transistors. In Electric Circuits, we'd analyze a lot of these circuits that you'd probably never see in real life, at least in terms of their structure. In Intro to Electronics, we would actually learn a lot of circuits and circuit types that you would see in real life, namely stuff like rectifiers. And it felt cool to actually sort of learn about the kinds of circuits that you'd actually see in real life and how to properly analyze them. Now, considering that this class was online, 8 a.m., with surprise team assignments at the end of the lectures sometimes, and there were labs that were difficult to understand weekly online, where you'd have to communicate with your lab partner over some sort of chatting thing like WebEx or Discord or whatever. How did this class end up in S tier? The simple answer is it was the dedication of the professor. He went completely out of his way to make sure that people understood things, especially in the labs, as well as possible. And he was very accommodating, basically saved this class from being a complete nightmare. He certainly retained the difficulty full scale, especially on those exams that were ridiculously long, but the trade-off was we actually came out of the class learning something. So, it was the kind of trend that you'd see a lot at this school, where different professors teaching the same course would oftentimes have a correlation between how difficult the class was with a specific professor and how good they were at actually teaching you the material. And oftentimes, the better professors would be the more difficult ones. And to be completely honest, it's better to take the harder ones, because then you actually learn something. Now, that's not to say that that's a trend that applies to every course. Engineering probability. Oh god. This course, especially towards the beginning, felt like the combination of everything I'm bad at when it comes to math. And you take that, you apply it to engineering, you combine it with a professor with some of the worst handwriting I've ever seen in my entire life, lectures with little to no direction, concepts that were difficult to understand, all of this combined together, difficult exams, including a final exam that was worth 40% of our final grade, with an average that was so bad the professor didn't even release it, and would later not even apply a curve to the course, something that a lot of other classes would do, especially the CS ones. It was a course that was absolutely positively traumatizing, and it was probably the lowest point in my entire college career when I opened up that final exam and was like, even in the worst cases on these kinds of exams, I usually know how to do at least one problem. Not here. I straight up just had to rely on partial credit there. And to be fair, I scored above half! But this still ended up being my lowest class grade ever at this school, and it was an awful experience. So now we move on to fall 2020. Personally, this was actually the worst semester ever for me. It was, again, during COVID. Everything was still basically online. My living situation in college was awful. It was to the point where there would just be days where I just would not even have the motivation to get out of bed. I still took 4 courses this semester, and the loadout of them, combined with my experiences throughout the semester, actually, looking back, weren't as bad as they could have been. Starting with digital signal processing, the direct sequel to Signals and Systems. You might think that I am a madman for taking the direct sequel to the hardest course that I've ever taken. And you're right, I am a madman. So digital signal processing sort of went the extra step when it came to signals and systems concepts, applying them to coding in MATLAB with auto-grading, very, very difficult homeworks, and some very advanced concepts with convolution and different diagrams, and we'd go very in-depth with fast Fourier transform algorithms and writing our own FFT algorithms. And then towards the end, they threw in probability. That wasn't fun. Also, wow, that final exam was probably just as bad as the engineering probability one. The only difference was we got to see the final exam average, and it's the only one I've ever seen that was actually below a 50. So yeah, cool concepts, interesting class. Wow, was it unbalanced and difficult. It's gonna go in C tier. History and culture of games. After taking analog role-playing games, I decided that I might as well take another game design course with the same professor to satisfy my communication intensive requirement, while also taking another course that had a very good reputation and seemed very interesting. The first third of this course sort of gets you used to the formatting of the course and sort of puts you in this little box where there are specific assignments that you need to do here and there in order to sort of introduce yourself to the course. Then they take the training wheels off, and man, is it a fun time. Because at that point, you can basically do whatever the hell you want to get points in the class. You can write little think pieces about topics you're interested in to get points here and there. You can design one-page tabletop dungeons and the way that they're traversed for points here and there. You can write a full-on holistic analysis on a topic of your choice and write a formal paper about something that you consider to be very valuable. I did that, and man was it a good time. It's funny looking back on all of these courses that I've taken and saying that some of my best work in any of the courses came in a class called History and Culture of Games. There was a paper that I actually wrote in this course about Flash games that I might actually turn into a video essay at some point. I'm that proud of it, actually. And it just felt like it was a course where I could really write about what I was passionate about when it came to video games. I just kind of wish that I had a little more motivation to get out of bed occasionally so that I could have actually submitted some of those assignments on time. That's on me. That all said and done, though, this class is still great. I'd recommend it to everyone. It's going in S tier. Principles of Economics. This class, of course, much like the other ones, was entirely online. This one was all pre-recorded lectures. And good fucking lord, taking this class in your 6th semester is not a good choice, because holy shit is it boring. To give you an idea of it, I think I actually missed an exam in this course, and the vast majority of the homeworks, I put very little effort into this course, still got a B-. It's such a fucking snooze fest, but it's the kind of snooze fest that everyone expects. It's one of those courses that hundreds of people sign up for, usually freshmen, so that they can get it done and do other prereq courses in economics. It is just a bunch of extremely basic math and simple concepts of economics. Well, at least simple to college students. It seems to be very difficult for certain people in Congress, but I digress. This course is gonna join Gen Psych in E tier. Quantum computer programming. I was excited to take this course when I first heard about it, before the lockdowns hit. And then I found out what this course was like online. It's not as interesting as the name suggested. Now that the class is in person, it's probably a lot more interesting. When I took it, that wasn't the case. It was basically just review of some physics stuff, some differential equation stuff, and here and there we do some quantum computing simulations using Qiskit and Amazon Web Services. It was really nothing special, but it also was really not that hard at all. And the grading for it, especially the paper at the end, was very forgiving. So all things considered, it's a class that's going to end up in high C tier. So after this point, I was on my away semester, and it was a period of 8 months where I wasn't taking any classes. By the time that fall 2021 began, I was actually kind of excited to get back into the swing of things, especially considering that this semester was in person again. It felt like we were actually back to the swing of things, minus the fact that we still had to wear masks and all that. But it felt like at least somewhat of a return to normal. I have made it abundantly clear in a lot of my videos that online classes and I mix like oil and water. So I was really hoping that I could prove to myself that when things went in person again, I could actually perform well again. But it wasn't going to be easy. This was going to be another 6-class semester, because I had to catch up again. And I had still not fulfilled the requirement of doing that introductory science elective, where I had to either take Intro to Bio and Lab, Cell Bio, or Chem 1. I took what seemed like the easiest of the 3, which was Intro to Bio and Lab, and my god do I regret it. Not because the class was hard, it wasn't. It was fairly easy. It was because this was the most boring class I've taken in my entire life. And it had some of the worst lectures I've ever seen with some of the worst lecture slides I've ever seen. It felt like they didn't even try, and it was clear that the vast majority of the slides they use are slides that are reused. A lot of classes recycle lecture slides time and time again. And the fact that they've done this, and they continue to keep these same flagrant typos in the lecture slides, absolutely baffles me to no end. Not only that, but the lecturer I had would pronounce the typos as if it was the actual word. It was ridiculous. I couldn't believe it was real sometimes. Combine that with the fact that this class had in-class assignments, so you couldn't just skip the lectures because they were bad. You actually had to sit in there and do them. And it sucked. It really sucked. And the exams sucked too, not because they were hard, just because they were bad. The only thing that was kind of interesting was the presentation that we did, which was actually kind of fun. Then there was the lab portion of the course, which was sort of like this separate other side course you take alongside it that's 1 credit, and it was just as bad. It was this incredibly boring lab simulation thing that we did. I would call it in silico, which is, you know, the way that you'd call it. The way that my professor called it was in silico, but this was also the same professor that pronounced amino acids amino acids. That's a fun one. So just all around, I just had incredibly competent bio professors here. Combined with how boring the classes were and how uninterested I was in the material, this should come to absolutely nobody's surprise that this class firmly goes in F tier. Computer vision for visual effects. This course is elusive. It is taught once every 4 semesters, and it has some specific prerequisites for it. Prerequisites that it's well worthy of. You need those prerequisites for it. It is a deceptively difficult course, but also an extremely fun one. It combines coding concepts and programming algorithms and that kind of stuff with video production. It was like my 2 favorite things coming together. It was amazing. I was part of a great team. We had a damn good time. Our final project, we made this like Minecraft parody video. It was a ton of fun. We used Blender for some of it. We programmed a bunch of it. I made an intro in After Effects. I learned a lot about video and visual effects concepts that I will definitely be applying to future videos, and it was just a great time. This class would be an SS tier if it weren't for the final homework and how awful it was for me. There was this specific problem that had to do with putting a 3D model in a video, and it was one of the most painful things I've ever experienced. It's been a while since I've taken the course, but the main thing that I remember is, wow, I never want to work with Cinema 4D ever again. That ruined this class's chances at being an SS tier. That said, it's still going in single S tier. Great course. If you can manage to fit it into your schedule when it's taught, definitely take it if you got the prereqs. Microprocessor systems. This is sort of the sequel to LITech, Embedded Control. It's another embedded software class, and this one is sort of the modernized version of it, where you go super in-depth. You're handed the reins in the programming, and the professors and TAs don't help you nearly as much, intentionally, to try and make you be the problem solver a lot more. We worked with this microcontroller that had a touch screen. It was really interesting. We actually didn't use the touch screen for any of the labs, but I did end up using it for the final project. This class also had some quizzes that we really needed more time for than we were given. But the labs themselves, they were so much fun, man. The structuring of them was so much fun. I loved the depth task system that they had in them. It was so motivating. And considering that this class effectively had 10 hours of class blocks per week, plus the amount of time that you'd spend on it outside of class, yeah, I needed that motivation because I was spending a lot of my spare time working on this course and carrying my lab partner through it. Outside of the signals classes that I took, this is probably the hardest one that I've taken. That said, it was still fun enough to end up in A tier, and it helped to cement my passion for embedded software. Up next, we have Professional Development 3. This one was all about what they called leadership competencies and sort of trying to prepare you more for the real world. And a lot of classes that try to do that don't succeed. This one actually succeeded spectacularly at that. This, surprisingly, was one of the most important courses I've ever taken because it taught me a lot of the fundamentals of what you should do in job interviews. You know, you'll look up how to prepare for job interviews and how to be prepared for them. And a lot of these types of articles and things are not very helpful when it comes to that at all. This class was helpful. Very, very helpful when it came to that. It was also really boring. And it definitely could have used some work on some of those boring elements. But when it was good, it was really, really, really good. And aside from that, it was fairly inoffensive. So it sort of ends up balancing out to a B tier class. Definitely worth taking. Not that you'd have the choice, it's required. Computer hardware design. This class is funny. I initially took this course in fall 2020, and I ended up basically soft dropping it, and by that I mean pass no crediting it and getting no credit for it because I was just kind of watching lab deadlines pass without doing anything and realized I needed to just kind of drop the course because it was online and I had no motivation to do anything. The following year, in fall 2021, things are in person. I take this course. One of the main reasons that I had dropped the course initially in fall 2020 is because I couldn't find a lab partner, mainly because everything was online. Fall 2021, I have my lab partner, and I carry his ass through every single lab with almost no effort. If it weren't for how unmotivated I was to do anything in fall 2020, I could have easily breezed through this course that semester. This is by far the easiest 4,000 level course I took at this school, and it's one of the easiest classes I've taken, period. And on top of that, it taught me some useful stuff. This is the class that taught me Verilog and interfacing with an FPGA. I was effectively able to do all of the labs on my own, and it still wasn't that hard, like, at all. At the end of the day, I kind of wish there was a bit more of a challenge. And this is actually one of the classes where 100% of your grade is labs, which on paper is actually pretty cool. But in practice, for a course this easy, I kind of wish there actually were exams to just test the material a little more. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty inoffensive course. Definitely worth taking if you're looking for something not hard and teaching you some good fundamentals, and looking for something to satisfy a lab elective if you're an electrical engineer. It's going in B tier. Applied Game Theory. This was the last humanities course that I had to take. It was the reason that I took Principles of Economics, since that was one of the prerequisites for it. The name, you might think of your boy MatPat. You might think it's a game design course. No, it's an economics course. It's about decision making. It's about math. Lots and lots of math. It's about analyzing basic games like Prisoner's Dilemma and different types of gambling and whether a company should enter a market or not, analyzing payoffs and risks and all of these different things. It's very interesting concepts. It had an extremely well-made structure to it. You had these 4 clear-cut defined units of the course, where there was static games with complete information, dynamic games with complete information, static games with incomplete information, dynamic games with incomplete information. Perfectly laid out, very well structured, very well done, and this class had some of the most generous grading I've ever seen on the exams. So why is it going in D tier? Why, after all of that praise that I gave the course, is it going in D tier? 2 words. Pop quizzes. I thought we left this shit back in high school, guys. Why are there pop quizzes? Who thought this was a good idea? What were they thinking? It took a class that otherwise would have been a great time into a semester-long stress fest. Because you'd walk into every single class wondering if you would have to rush understand the material because you now have to put everything away for a pop quiz instead of just sitting down and having a lecture during a lecture block. That, combined with the fact that the lecture notes were not posted online, there were just a couple things that really rubbed me the wrong way with this course. So despite all the other good things I said about this course, I can't give this class anything above D tier because of those 2 things. And it's sad, because this course could have been as high as S. But with pop quizzes, come on, man. Alright, so we have 1 semester left. My final semester in college, spring 2022, I had 4 classes left. They were my 3 introductory electrical engineering courses that I had saved for my final semester because I figured they'd be relatively easy. And I wasn't completely wrong, but I also wasn't completely right. And then Capstone. Starting with Fields and Waves 1, in a lot of ways this class sort of felt like Physics 3, both in terms of quality and in terms of the material that we actually learned. It was a lot of stuff about electromagnetic theory and the physics of wires and transmission lines, learning about electromagnetism and Maxwell's equations, and applying those to certain labs. The labs themselves were kind of interesting, especially the first big one that we did, where we had to block a specific radio frequency using impedance matching. That was a lot of fun. Then the other one where we had to make a Beekman motor, that one was not very fun. It was just very finicky. It just kind of felt like it wasn't working. And maybe that's a skill issue, but it just wasn't very fun. But that's okay, because the rest of the class also wasn't fun. On paper, when you hear that homeworks are going to be graded based on completion rather than accuracy, it sounds like a good thing. It sounds like a load off, that you don't have to worry about the harsh grading of a homework assignment destroying your class grade. And then you realize that you're not going to get feedback for your incorrect answers, because you're going to get a 1 out of 1 or a 2 out of 2 because you tried every problem. Now, you might counter this by saying that, oh, but the solutions are posted, so at least you'll figure out what you did wrong in the homeworks, which, while that may be true, the solutions aren't guaranteed to be posted in a timely fashion after the homeworks are due. It's not all it's cracked up to be, is what I'm trying to say. Now, the main reason that this class is going to be as low ranked as you'll see it is because of something called standards-based grading, which was applied to the course. This was basically this new quirky little way of applying grades to the class. Again, this was one of those classes where the professor started it with, we're gonna do things differently this semester, and boy was I seeing some red flags. And those red flags were not false positives. This standards-based grading system was not standards-based grading. It was standards cringe grading.
There's no forgiveness for that.
Let me explain. So standards-based grading is sort of this approach to grading where instead of trying to grade you based on how well you did on an exam or how accurately your problem solution was, it's grading you based on how well you are perceived to have understood the material. On paper, this sounds great. Being able to actually have your grade reflect how well you actually understand the material. It makes it seem like you actually get something out of your grade and you understand it more. And, you don't get points off because you were unlucky. In practice, it's basically just the traditional grading system with extra steps. Let me talk to you about an experience I had with standards-based grading. So the way that it's broken down is there are specific materials and concepts that you are to demonstrate throughout the course. And the funny thing is, the main way that you demonstrate this knowledge throughout the course is on exams. Yeah, you're probably seeing where I'm going with this here. So there was a problem on the third exam about magnetic vector potential, and it was a problem that I had practiced a lot. I knew how to do it, and I did it on the exam. It involved doing a cross product, doing this specific equation that was on the crib sheet that we were given. You perform the mathematical operations, you apply an integral to both sides of the equation, and then you apply your final answer, you put in any coefficients, and you're done. I did every single step correctly. And mistakenly, I put the wrong unit vector in my final answer. And because of that, I got a 1 out of 2 for that specific concept on my standards-based grading sheet. With the regular grading system, this would have been what? Like an 8 out of 10, a 9 out of 10 on that problem, if it were worth 10 points? On this one, I lost half credit because of one little symbol being absent or incorrect in my final answer. The numerical value was correct. All the steps that I showed were correct. I put the wrong unit vector in my final answer and lost half credit and had to retest for that, which thank God there were retests available in this class, but I had to retest for that problem. And it was just an experience in how completely pointless the standards-based grading system was if it's basically just a more bastardized version of traditional grading. And it really makes you think about how maybe there's a reason that every single other class uses traditional grading. It's because it works. It has flaws, but it works. You come up with this new convoluted system to try and grade students on their understanding of the material, and you just end up doing the same thing as the other system, but worse. Anyway, I've ranted long enough about how much I hate this system. Fields and Waves 1 goes in E tier, screw that course. Electrical Energy Systems. I underestimated this course, both in difficulty and in quality. Now, it wasn't a super hard course. Not by any means. It was just I had some difficulty understanding the material, and it probably was just a me thing. But I also underestimated the quality of this course. The lectures were a lot better than I expected them to be, and the material was also more interesting than I thought it was going to be. And it just ended up being a surprisingly enjoyable course. I did not expect it to be, for the most part, above average. And for the vast majority of the course, it was basically on a collision course for B tier. And then the final exam hit. And all the exams in this course were open book, open notes, which was very relieving. This class also, by the way, had some of the most generous grading I've ever seen. All of these exams were open book, open notes, and there weren't really any restrictions on that. Obviously, you couldn't bring anything that could connect to the internet, but if it was on paper, you could bring it. So the final exam hits, and the professor walks in and says, "You can't use any example problems, only lecture notes. If I see you with example problems, you're getting an F in the course." Wow! That was kind of shitty to just blindside us like that and change the rules on us after 2 exams that weren't like that. So that dropped it down to C tier. Could have been a B tier course, but then you pulled that on me at the last second. Not cool. Microelectronics Technology. This course sort of took some of the concepts from Intro to Electronics and made them more physics-y and more chemistry-y. Basically, we were learning about the physical chemistry of semiconductors and the way that electrons and holes traverse through things like diodes and transistors and PN junctions and all this stuff, how things get ionized and dopants and acceptors and all that stuff. So basically, it was an electrical engineering course that was as far removed from the stuff I was interested in as possible. Combine that with the fact that once again, homeworks were graded based on completion, and this class had the absolute fucking worst, by far worst, homework solutions and exam solutions I've ever seen. They would have typos in the final answers. The steps for the solutions would be out of order. I don't even know how you do that. Some of the problems just wouldn't even have steps. They would just have a final answer in the solution. Oh my god. It was so bad. I can't believe how bad it was. Every time that I thought the class couldn't get worse, it just would. It just would get worse. It's one of those classes where there's like 32 trillion formulas you have to memorize, and maybe 100 of them are in the lecture slides. The rest you might be able to learn by struggling through the homeworks, and you won't actually learn most of them through the homeworks, and then on the exams you just kind of have to wing it. Yeah, that was this course, except combine that with the terrible homework and exam solutions that I described, and just some of the most boring electrical engineering material, and a final exam that was pure pain. It was just so bad. It was painful. I hated every last bit of it. Unsurprisingly, it's gonna go in F tier. This is the worst class I've ever taken. And finally, we have Capstone. It's the final boss of any engineering major. You have to take a multidisciplinary course where you join a team with other engineering majors, typically different engineering majors, and work together on this project that's usually very ill-fated, and you have to traverse through confusing documentation, crazy outdated systems, and a lot of times people that you've never even met before. So this is going to surprise a lot of people. I loved this course. So I was very worried about it because we spent the first 2 weeks of the semester online because of the outbreak of Omicron or whatever that happened during the turn of the calendar year in 2022. I wasn't able to meet any of my team members face to face, and it was just another example of the difference that meeting people in person can make, because the experience that we had online for the first 2 weeks and the experience that we had walking into that design lab room with the other team members and talking to them face to face was night and day. from the moment that we met in person, progress actually started to accelerate. And once we got through all of the BS of writing documents and statements of work, and we were actually able to start working on the project, my morale in the course and my enjoyment of it and the actual progression of our project all skyrocketed. It was a constant stream of just complete chaos. But it was the kind of chaos that was actually fun. I was very lucky to be on an absolute all-star team. It was a team of 8 people, including myself, and everybody on the team pulled their weight and did a fantastic job. And it resulted in an absolutely phenomenal experience that actually prepared me for the real world spectacularly well. So I can't give this course anything lower than S tier. This was a really good time. It really felt like the finale of my time in college, and it was definitely the course that I put the most effort into that semester by far. And the class in general is a time sink. Combine that with where I was putting my motivation and senioritis, and you know why the classes that I ranked this semester ended up where they did. So there it is. There is my tier list of all the courses that I took at RPI during my 4 years. And looking at everything, it's fairly balanced in terms of where things ended up above C tier, where things ended up below C tier, where things ended up within C tier. It's pretty balanced. One might call it a normal distribution, you know? I would say that honestly, the quality of education that I got at this school was, overall, it was top-notch. And it was top-notch specifically when it mattered. A lot of the courses that you see in D tier and below were courses that, in terms of what I should have gotten out of them, were pretty inconsequential. The courses that mattered ended up being the courses that were C tier and up. Taking that into account, and the fact that a lot of professors were really doing the best that they could during times that they really could not have seen coming. A lot of the courses in the lower tiers, at least, were in part in the lower tiers through no fault of the professor. And a lot of the courses that were in the higher tiers were because the professors put in an insane amount of work to make those classes as enjoyable and worthy of your time as possible. And all things considered, looking at where the courses ended up, it's clear to see what I enjoyed, what I ended up doing, and which kinds of courses were the ones that not only I enjoyed, but the courses that you would have seen the most effort in. Now, if I were to go back and change the order in which I took any of these courses and swap any semester schedules around, there's this course called Intro to Number Theory that I could have definitely taken during my data structures semester. That probably would have lightened the load in future semesters. I definitely should not have taken engineering probability over the summer. That should have been a fall 2020 course. And I could have also potentially taken computer hardware design during fall 2020 and gotten that taken care of because of how easy that course was. But at the end of the day, I ended up taking all of these courses. I ended up passing all of these courses. And once things went back in person, my grades started to rebound immediately. And that was a huge motivation boost. It really felt like, I'd still got it. I ended up graduating cum laude, so, even despite the slump that I had online, I was still able to prove my worth. I suppose that also means that I am truly a figure of authority on this subject matter when it comes to ranking these courses. Truly just the most objective and reputable source on all of these courses. Again, please, seriously, this is an opinionated list. Don't take it as fact, but it's definitely something to think about when it comes to my personal experiences as a graduate of the class of 2022. But anyway, all that said, that is my tier list ranking. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a lot of fun to do. The next video that goes up is going to be Jodan54 Reacts Season 6, Episode 28. Get excited for that. And with all that said, keep looking forward, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.